Good morning to you. This is another episode of Create a Generational Love Cycle. And today's date is September the 19th, 2024. And last week I did an episode on schools, talking about the limited hours and what that's actually setting our children up for, given this fast rush society. And when I say limited hours, you guys, that I gave an example that my son went to one school here in Illinois, and they had 4 minutes between their classes to finish up one class, like go to a locker, go to the restroom, and then go to the other class. 4 minutes. Now, they could tell their teacher they need to go to the bathroom, but if you got many students doing that, then that can disrupt the lessons that they're there to learn. And then you have children who need to go to the bathroom, maybe take longer. We're supposed to be washing our hands for proper hand washing, 30 seconds to a minute, and even 1 minute takes away that time for the break. And then what about water, drinking water? We have people that are walking around not drinking enough water, dehydrated, not eating healthy, rushing around, increased hospitalizations, stress, chronic health conditions, all of which are feeding into this generational cycle of pain. And so my son last week when I was recording, he said, "Mom, can I say something? Can I say something?" And you've heard I've done at least, I believe, one episode with Cameron Chambers, my soon to be 13-year-old son. And I said, "Cam, let's put you on next week." And so when I do these podcasts, there's no memorization. I'm not trying to memorize. I'm trying to have a conversation, a discussion, to talk about things, to share my thoughts on particular issues, especially dealing with this cycle of pain, this generational cycle of pain, where we keep infecting thoughts to generations, right? And so, create a generational love cycle is rooted in thinking positive. What do we want to happen? We want to dismantle the thoughts that created this cycle of pain. I'm not just talking about pain, physical pain. I'm talking about mental, emotional pain. I'm talking about abuse, violence, and on all levels, bullying behavior. I'm talking about children, adults feeling unworthy, low self-esteem. I'm talking about imprisonment in particular mental constructs or patterns that maybe our grandfather had. People not living their dreams, being stuck in a job, 8 hours a day, that is literally tearing them apart from the inside out. That is basically covering up their purpose, their divine purpose. We all have seeds of purpose within us, seeds of greatness, as you've heard, Dr. Miles Monroe and many other great leaders talk about the seeds of greatness within us. But the longer you continue to be in something, it it kind of trains your body, trains your mind to think a different way, to think about, well, maybe I do need to spend my lifetime at this job, even though I don't feel fulfilled. It kind of just really, we wither away, if you will. And so my son was actually listening to his live lesson. They're watching her live lesson last night, and he said something to me. I was downstairs doing some laundry, and he said, "Mom, someone just said that schools are losing touch of their students' dreams." And I said, "Wow, that is a profound statement." And I'm not sure who it was, but my son is the one that brought it up. And so I said, "Cam, let's just go ahead and do a podcast on that this morning." And I did go through and find out, did a little research, and someone actually wrote about on Medium. I'll put the link in this in the informational box regarding this podcast. But he wrote an article that is on Medium, and he basically said that the schools are killing our children. And it was in alignment with what Cam heard yesterday, and that, this is in schools, our children are, and I've said this before, our children in our schools, in school system, usually about 9 months, depending on where they're at, maybe longer, summer school, 68 hours a day. They are getting trained, not just in education, but trained how to think, limited on, what they can draw instead of being able to draw what they want to draw. And Tim actually talks about that. He says that, the teachers, they're telling them what to do, where to sit, how to think. And I think about my son. He had to sit and my daughter too as well in the school. They had to sit at a certain table, and even in a different state, they couldn't really sit with their friends. They had to sit down where they were. The focus for lunchtime was just to eat. When they got outside, they could play and do stuff, but it was just to eat and get on. And I can understand from the point of the school trying to keep order, but are we trying to keep so much order that it is becoming restrictive to our children's growth? And I'm not here to bash school. I really want them to look at how are we helping the students we serve achieve their divine purpose? How are we helping them to do the work that they're here to do? And my husband, even, where we lived at one point, and we actually thought about it. We came up, we said, you know what? It seems like some of these schools are actually, and beyond public schools, are training the people to stay within a neighborhood and work at these jobs, factory jobs, grocery stores, wherever it be. And I know it's a business, but is that limiting our people? Is that limiting us, humanity? And then when we feel like that we're caged up, and I mentioned this last episode, you know how something has been caged for a long time and it finally gets out and it's just so wild.
Like anger.
Just like anger. It's so wild. It's so frustrating. That's Cam. He's ready to come on. They're so wild. And we wonder about the bullying type, the loss of control and how people try to control others with words and with actions, bullying, violence, domestic violence, sexual abuse, childhood sexual abuse, projecting their pain out on others because they feel like there's no other way to do it, no other way to release it. So I know almost every situation, if not all, start in childhood. How we train our children. And training our children is also too deciding what school we're going to put them in and what we're going to tolerate. Because as I've shared with you, we took our children out of school, public school, and put them back in online school. We did it during COVID, and we did it again when my son, and my daughter were just literally so emotional, frustrated about their school. They knew they had a taste of what school was, what praising is, what asking them what they want to do, offering so many classes, languages that they could learn, the freedom, the flexibility, the balance, being able to travel as a family and not have to worry about calling the school and say, hey, they're going to miss 5 days and get tied up in truancy and all of that. We didn't have to worry about that. We had flexibility. We had social, family bonding, being able to go on field trips with our children. So, we have to look at, as parents, I'm doing what I can at home, but the school, this place that I'm sending my children to for the majority of the day, are they in alignment with what I desire for my children? If you're, breaking this generational cycle of pain, are they in alignment? Are they helping? How are they helping them to achieve their divine purpose? How are they helping them to achieve and sustain overall health, including mental health? You talk about teenage suicides that are out there, people that are committing suicides in schools. We went home a few months ago, and the neighbor told me that there was 2 other people, children in high school, that committed suicide. So something is going on. And I don't think it's just, what's going on at home. It has something to do with the schools, and we've heard of that children being bullied at school, feeling like they're unworthy. So we have to stop what's going on. And like I said, the way that we do that, we have to get to the heart of the matter. In this case, we have to get to the thought of the matter. So I'm going to go ahead and bring on Cam because he started talking and he's etching to talk to you. talk to you guys. So, hey, Cam.
Hi.
Don't be nervous. Hi. He took that long sigh, right? We've been talking about deep breathing and how to relax yourself. But Cam, tell them how old are you are. How old are you?
I am 12.
12,
Currently.
going on
13.
13. And so you are the one that yelled to me downstairs that, Mom, they just said that.
That schools are basically taking children's dreams and just crushing them right in front of them.
Oh my.
Like, you know how teasing works? So, say you had a candy that I really liked and you just ate it in front of me. That's basically what schools are doing to children's dreams.
Ah, it's interesting that you use candy as an example. So something sweet, something that we like, in moderation, of course, and they're
Yeah.
taking it from them right in their face. They're doing it right in their faces.
Yeah.
What now? You heard this at what? You were listening to
I
your.
was listening to my live lesson, so they have these little previews. If you got there early, you would be able to watch the previews. And so basically, there was a speaker. He would tell you how long left till the live lesson started. They would he would share all these interesting facts about the teachers. And one thing he said was that students are losing their dreams in public schools. And I can see why. Because if all public schools, for the social studies that my public school had, that I last went to, if it's the same for every school, that isn't social studies. Learning about what a river is, to me, is not social studies. What is social studies is Indian trade routes, the Silk Road, even the wars. That would be social studies to me.
And you
And
mentioned. Go
what
ahead.
she was talking about in public school was more geography. That was more if you were going to be an architect,
Okay.
but we weren't. We were supposed to be learning about social studies. So if I knew what I knew now, I would ask her, what about Indian trade routes? You know, all this other stuff. What about the start of Christianity, the start of Islam, all that
Right.
other stuff?
And you brought that up this morning, and the question I have is that how do you feel like learning about Indian trade routes, Christianity, Muslim? Because I've seen your lessons, the topics of your lessons, and Muslim and India and just all this stuff that's kind of just wide open. That's one of the things I learned about online school is that they're very objective in a way. They get to present what they want to present, just like Cam is going and Kayla going to this private school, Acellus Academy. And how do you feel like learning about Indian trade routes and Christianity, Cam? How do you feel like that's feeding into your purpose?
I think it expands like my viewpoint of things. Because I'll say, oh, because some people will be like, oh, since you're Muslim, you're a bad person. But what people don't see is that Muslims, Islam, and Christianity all follow the golden rule.
And what is that?
The golden rule, basically, to obey God, because
To,
they all have one God.
mm,
That's what people don't look into.
hmm. And when I've talked about that before, in that fulfilling your divine purpose is what if you decide, and this is not about religion, it's more about following a higher power. It's more about, and so some people may call this higher power spirit, God, infinite intelligence. I've used it, higher spirit. I was raised to call it God, and we use that terminology, and I've used all the terminologies around our children. My husband reads the Quran. I've read certain parts of the Quran. And so it's not so much about, you know, who the name, because we get caught and tripped up in the name. It's what do you believe?
Because there's three different types of Muslims. There's like multiple different types of every Christianity, every religion. And so like why can't we just all be one? Like sure, we felt trapped back in like I don't know how long ago, but there was basically you could only have one religion. And so if you had anything other than that, you would be executed and people would pay to watch you be executed. And that's the problem with humanity. They will pay. to see you get killed in front of them and
Pay for you to suffer.
and yeah.
Mhm.
And so the thing is, what I've seen in my social studies is the difference between Christianity and Muslims is the Quran has the direct translation, which is "Shut up, I am God," and Christians apparently translated that translation to what they wanted to hear is "Be still, because I am God," or "Be
Mhm.
still, I am God." And
And
so,
when we talk about that, we don't want to get too heavy into the religion, because I want to hear, more about, purpose and
mhm,
feeding schools feeding into it. But the thing is to, I think, to get from that is that we all have a divine purpose. We look to this higher spirit to help us to achieve our divine purpose. And a lot of things have been taken out of schools, but we have to look at how can we help our children to do the work that they're here to do. And I've talked about alignment with this spirit, divine spirit, and in helping us. And how can we, put that in there? So Cam brought up, we need to learn about, the multiple views,
yeah,
being an
you
objective
can't
school.
just have one viewpoint like, oh, Christians are the best, oh, Muslims are the best. You have to have multiple viewpoints.
Hmm.
Just like if you only have one eye, you're going to only be able to see things out of that one eye. If you have two eyes, you're going to be able to see things out of those two eyes.
Right. And the thing is, and when you were, something had came to me when you said that, is that when we focus on labeling, we tend to be so narrow focused, and we're our powers are concentrated in something that it should not be in.
Hmm.
And so, just because we do talk about the different faiths, what is the ultimate meaning behind that? So, Cam, what did you feel like? What else do you feel like needs to be in schools to help children, feel good about themselves? Because that was one of the things, you would come home from school and you would just be upset. What are some things, if you could give me maybe five things that you feel like schools should do to help kids do the work they're here to do, whether it is architect, whether it is music, whatever it may be. What do you think needs to be in place?
I think that schools should like be able to provide the extracurricular activities that you want to take because some schools that I have visited have not provided those. And
Yeah.
another thing,
Wait, just a second. The school that he went to, we were trying to balance the, if you will, the good, not so good, or trying to balance the positive with negatives. And we tried to get him into an art class, and because Cam loves art. And we found out that the person said that he was not going to start it that semester. It would possibly start next semester, and there was no wait list. And when I actually mentioned that in the parent teacher conference, they everybody seemed kind of surprised, like they knew, wow, that could have been a positive for him to kind of balance what he was going through. And then Cam just recently, another school that we had looked into, possibly public school, he wants to play the electric guitar, and they had a great they had a band. We saw the auditorium, but he told us that they didn't have the electric guitar and no other
no
instruments,
other
right? No
instruments.
instruments that Cam was interested in. So it was limited. And I don't know if that has to do with funds, and I'm sure it does, but that's a good thing. So looking at, and I know if you had every single thing, that would probably cost a lot of money, and you'd have to have people that's gonna teach it. But looking more into the extracurricular activities to help feed our children. But what about even just an assessment? Because we have the
Well,
paperwork to
I
do.
feel like they should tell the parents about the assessment because my old school made me take an assessment. You didn't know anything about it until I told you about
That's right. It was an emotional assessment. So
it. And
I
if I put something in there about my emotions that wasn't true and I was just playing about it, then you would have had to get involved and you would have been probably like mad, concerned,
Right.
and other stuff. And then we would have to go talk to the social worker, and I would probably get in trouble for putting something I didn't mean to put in there.
Right, but you had an assessment, emotional well-being assessment, and we didn't know anything about it. There was no way to get the results. So there's assessing. They assessed Cam and Kayla, and we had nothing. But yet still, they had um, the school had actually reached out regarding Kayla and wanted to put her in a friendship group. And I literally had to email her and say, no, Kayla has friends. She just is very selective about who she calls her friends. But I want to get back to Cam. Cam, what about was there any assessment to ask you what do you want to be when you grow up?
No,
Right. Anything about what are your likes, dislikes, like
there was nothing about that.
right.
All it was stuff about your environment. Do you like this school environment? What would you rate this school environment? Are you having any problems at home? Stuff that would get you or your parents in trouble.
Well, not so much trouble, but that's something that we do need to know and need to address. I do get that, but
It would be nice if they at least told us.
nice told us, but also nice when we're talking about purpose. It would have been nice if okay, that's you want to know about the school, but what about the individual person
Mhm.
and what they're here for? Because I've said before when I taught nursing that once people feel valued, they tend to open up.
Mhm.
They tend to be more of what they so I
'Cause-
so assessment. What else do you think schools should do to help students realize like you like art, you like music? What else do you think?
See, I don't really think this is at all related to what you were asking about, but I think the teachers should be just as respectful as the students. So, like, say you really respect all your teachers, but they don't respect you, because that hurts. I respected my gym teacher. One day he said something to me, and me being dark skinned, and for him being white skinned, I saw that was kind of racist what he said to me, and so that really hurt. I almost broke down right there in the middle of the
But
video.
the background in that is that he only said it to Cam. Cam
He only
felt
said it to me.
all the other students were doing the same thing that you were doing, but he's the one that said
Got in
something,
trouble.
got
Yeah,
in trouble.
I'm the one who got in
So
trouble.
and the school was mostly Caucasian.
Yeah.
So I don't want to put racism in, even though it's part of the cycle of pain. We do need to address that. But that's one thing, Cam. It's not just about racism; it's about equality.
Mhm.
In that, because I really want to just take racism out and just use the word equality, because that's what we really need to focus on. As Mother Teresa said, I don't want to focus on war; I want to focus on peace. So the thing is, what you're saying is that teachers need to be respectful, because I
Mhm.
mentioned about being valued, and it actually has something to do with that. So
'Cause
being
not
respectful,
only
and then the background on that is that equality
Yeah.
is to treat each student as an equal.
Yeah.
Because if we've dealt that with our past, and that people being pushed back, not getting the books to read, not the reason why we have some illiteracy is that many people didn't have books to read, taking it away from them. So having that equality and saying you are just as capable as John,
Yeah.
or David, or whoever it may be, because that if you feel and you want to feel that from the inside out, that's the thing. You want to feel that from the inside out. But we need teachers that can help our children
Yeah.
see that you are equal. You are no different
Yeah.
from anyone
Yeah.
else. Right.
Just like one time I told you about this, my social studies teacher. Well, first I had this kid in my class that had some speech impediment problems, and so I was his friend, which we would talk a lot. So, well, yeah, we would talk a lot, not like in class, but like during break time in class. So one day she decided to take him out of class because she needed to talk to him, and I didn't know what they were talking about. But when she came back in without him, and after about 5 minutes, he came back in, and you know how like people when they've been crying, they'll usually have like a redder face, and so his face was red. He had tears in his eyes. I could see it, and so after that, after 10 minutes, she went to talk to him again, and he came back even more sad. And then he told, and then at the end of the day, eighth period, he told our one of our other teachers about how his sister would like bother him while he was trying to eat breakfast. Like he was saying that he couldn't even eat breakfast without his sister bothering him.
Mm-hmm.
So not only did our social studies teacher tear him down, but he's also being apparently torn down by his
At
sister at home,
home. Absolutely.
his younger sister.
And that's one of the things that as parents we need to address, because I've heard of that where the bullying didn't start just at school. The bullying type behavior starts at home. And if we consistently feed it, if we're not interrupting that cycle, that pattern, that message that is going to our children, that's where we have low self-esteem. That's where we could potentially get teenage suicide and teenage pregnancy and anger and repeat cycles of bullying when we're not interrupting that. So I don't know if the kid had talked to his parents about that, but just to have a teacher, someone you're supposed to look up to, that literally beats you with words, and even realizing that the student had a speech impediment, that, you know, some learning.
Because you could see the smirk on her face. If you were in that classroom, you would see the smirk on her face when she came back into the class.
Yeah. So, and that's part of projecting our pain on our children. And that's what I fear the most. Cam experienced that in school, not just with the students, but also with the teachers. And so if you are setting up an environment where you are less than me, where I get to talk to you any kind of way, disrespectful, as Cam said, you're not equal to me. How does that bring about someone's purpose and impact it also with having rush, less time between classes? Cam would say you didn't even have ability to really process what happened at the end of one class to move on to the next class.
While I came out of social studies and went to language arts, which was on the other side of the building, and with 4 minutes, that was really hard to do because after that, I had to go to all the way back to the other side of the building to put my stuff up. And so basically, that was really confusing because I just came out of social studies and she would keep talking the whole class time. And so you go to language arts, you're like still focused on social studies because you're like, what did she say?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we got four things. So if and that's one of the things when we left Connections Academy, because initially they were going to a Connections Academy at the start of COVID. Oh, I mean, sorry, a year after COVID, because I homeschool you guys, my husband, we homeschooled, and then I turned into the primary homeschool, and then we went to Connections Academy to enlist their services to provide an educational environment that would benefit them, that would be positive, if you will. Prayed about that, thought about that often. That was my thought pattern. And so one thing that Connection was doing before we left, they sent out an email about really getting to encouraging our children's purpose. And I said, oh my gosh, right when we're leaving. But you say that there needs to be an extra curriculum driven purpose, maybe an academically driven purpose, built from assessments, talking to the kids, asking about what do they like? What instruments do they want to play? What do they want to be? And how can we each year, every quarter, whatever it may be, do something with our curriculum that help our children achieve their purpose. Yeah. You talked about value and respect, holding our children up to an esteem, reminding them, which is mine, reminding them of who they are. They are divine spirits, and also to equality, treating them with respect. What would you say, Cam, is the fifth one that you would think that schools need to do to help children achieve their purpose?
See, I would think that schools, they already block some of the apps, but people know how to get past those things.
Apps on computers?
On their computers. And so one day I was in science, and some kid was listening to something inappropriate, blasting inappropriate music from his computer.
And the teacher was in the
And
room, right?
you think that IT would have that, and you think that the teacher would hear that, but apparently he didn't. And so another thing, they didn't allow phones in school, and so I was in video recording at the time, and some kid had pulled out his phone, and the video recording teacher just didn't care. He just didn't care. He didn't say anything about the phone. He didn't confiscate it. He didn't do anything. But that same class, there was this kid that would say a lot of inappropriate things, like saying he likes minors, for example. But one day we got paired together on a project, and so we had to talk about some things that the school could improve on. So the second thing, the one time I asked him what was his school experience, he just avoided the question. But the second time, he really started talking. I asked him what he wanted to do when he grew up, and he said he wanted to do motorbikes or something.
So you asked him the question,
derby bikes,
and you said he was like a totally different person.
Yeah.
And so, man, can you think? Can you just visualize that, you guys? For those of you who have children in school, that if we just ask the question, if we just sow the seed, if we just bring them back to that inner child, that inner knowing that they're here for, what would that do for the other kids? What would that do for bullying? What would they do for teenage pregnancy? What would they do for teenage drinking? What would that do for all of the violence that we see in the world? Cameron, any last thoughts?
When I asked, the first time I asked him, his eyes still seemed dull, like he wasn't really there. But the second time I asked him, you could see the light little glow that people have in their eyes.
Wow.
When they're happy.
Wow.
Or need to express something, or when
they're sad. You hit that inner child.
And you could hear the crack in his voice, like he was about to cry.
Oh my gosh. And you didn't mention, Cam has told me this story, but he did not tell me in so vivid detail. And seeing the light in his eye, the dullness first, then the light in his eye, and then the cracking in his voice, like he was going to cry. That he knew on some level, this kid, that he had gotten far from his purpose, that he was not in alignment with it. Cameron Chambers, thank you so much for being here today. I love it. I love the conversation. I'm just so proud of Cameron. And one thing I do say is, we felt like Cameron was bringing up stuff, and it was almost like we felt like he was the one being blamed. But I tell you guys, when your kid goes to a new school and they see things, just like a job, you can go to a job and you see things, other people are experiencing it. They're used to a standard. And when they go out and go into something else that is totally opposite of that standard, culture shock, whatever you may call it, listen to your children. Listen to what they're saying. And then find a way, if like my mom said about my father, he didn't change. So I knew I had to. The school was hesitant about changing. They were making some strides, but we need our children to be in a healthy, safe environment so they can thrive and bring out the best in them. And the best is doing the work they're here to do, living their purpose. This is Tamika Chambers with Create a Generational Love Cycle. I've also restarted my newsletters for this fall season. And so I will put the link to as well in my in the introductory portion of it. And as you know, this podcast and just other work that I'm doing to help others, live their purpose, to really remember who they are. And I hope with Create a Generational Love Cycle that we're doing that, because that is our ultimate mission. The greatest calling on our lives is to love one another, right? As we love ourselves, to love everyone as the higher spirit, infinite intelligence, God, whatever you may call it, loves us, put us here as a family, not as people to be divisive and to have violence, but to have an abundant life, mind, body, and spirit. I'll talk to you guys soon. As always, make this lifetime great, because no matter what, you still can. And the first thing that we can do is change our thoughts.